All right, well, my name is Chris Hahn. I am the Dean for the Algonquin Center for Construction Excellence and the Perth campus. And I'm just going to wait just about 30 seconds or so. We got about 18 attendees, but just in case we have a few more coming in, I see a couple more coming in. And for those that are already in the room, good day and welcome to Virtual AC Day 1. So do a quick 10-second countdown and then we'll get started. A couple more. All right, I think we'll get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Virtual AC Day 1. So again, my name is Chris Hahn. I'm the Dean for the Algonquin Center for Construction Excellence and as well the Dean for the Perth campus in our community out in Perth, Ontario. I'm very happy to be here, very excited to kick off this winter semester with you. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. I just do want to introduce first my boss, Chris Jansen. So Chris, to give a wave, Chris is our Senior Vice President Academic. You may have gotten an email or two from him over the course of the lead up to the start of the winter term. Second little housekeeping item is that this event does include live closed captions in English. So captions are available directly in the Zoom toolbar. So you should see on your toolbar at the bottom something that says closed caption. It's got a little CC icon. And if you click that, you'll be able to get the closed captions. As well, on the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a chat box. And if you click chat, you feel free to use that feature. You could, if you want right now, you could introduce yourself, maybe let us know what program you're in, anything else you'd like us to know that's appropriate. We'll put it that way. If you have any questions, though, for our special guests, and I'll introduce them in a moment, you can type those in a Q&A tab. There is at the very bottom a Q&A tab, and you can click a question in there, and then we'll ask our special guests the question. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So as we progress, just type them in there and I'll make sure that they get asked at the end of the session. One final thing is that this session is being recorded and it will be added to the Algonquin College orientation website by the end of the week. So right now I'm pleased to introduce and welcome our two special guests from Cabinscape, Laura Mendez and her husband, John Lochner. So Laura and John are the co-owners of Cabinscape. You may have seen their cabins across the Instagram social media channel. Very happy that they're here with us today to talk about a few things. I think there'll be real interest in your company and its marketing success and potentially maybe even during the pandemic, how you've been able to sustain that, as well as some of the architecture of your cabins, the building techniques you use, the creative interiors, and where they are. And one final note on this, let's note that Cabinscape is a Canadian-owned and operated company with several cabins right across Ontario. So I think you'll be getting some folks to want to stay with you, Laura and John, after this. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and so you can begin your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session. I'm Laura Mendez and this is John, and as you know, we're the founders of Cabinscape. We design and we build off-grid tiny cabins in the wilderness. We currently have 12 cabins across Ontario, and if all goes according to plan, we'll hopefully have about 10, 12 more cabins by next summer. So we started Cabinscape about 3.5 years ago. Ultimately, we started the company because of our daughter. Before becoming parents, we were really big into backcountry canoe trips, camping trips. We would take off for a week at a time. We just loved being out in the wilderness, isolated. But then we had our daughter, and that sort of changed everything. And obviously there was all these reservations about taking our little toddler into a canoe out into the wilds of Algonquin Park. So that's when we really started to research and try to find alternative accommodations that could give us what we were wanting in a backcountry camping trip. Of course, we went to Airbnb and we started searching out these types of accommodations. And we couldn't really find anything. You know, of course, there's tons of accommodations on Airbnb, tons of cabins, tons of cottages, but mostly what we were finding are cottages sandwiched beside cottages, docks beside docks, and we really couldn't find anything that could give us what we wanted, which was, you know, remoteness, out in the wilderness. Also, at the time, we were really wanting to find low carbon vacation options. So we were searching for off-grid accommodations, and really we couldn't find anything. And that's when John had this crazy idea. Let's do this. Let's build our own tiny cabin. And at the time, I thought it was just a crazy idea. But somehow he convinced me, and that's really how it started, building our first cabin, and that's the Auburn cabin you see here on our screen. This cabin was built on the fly with the help of a family friend who is a general contractor. We built this in our John's sister's backyard, and it took a while, but we finally finished, and we put it on Airbnb. Our first cabin was on Airbnb. We also started an Instagram account, and that proved to be huge for us. The photo that you see on our screen on the right side is the first photo that we posted to our Instagram account. And this photo went viral. I don't know, it kind of spread everywhere. All these major tiny house accounts were posting it. Airbnb posted it, Ontario Travel posted it. And from there, we just started building up a following. We quickly booked up our summer weekends and weekdays, and we were just booked solid. And it was an incredible feeling. And we knew then that we were onto something. This photo here is of John and our daughter at the time. We knew that we wanted to continue doing this. It was such an incredible experience. And so we decided to build one more cabin. Here's another photo of our Auburn cabin here. And when I say tiny, we were building these on trailer beds. This is 160 square feet. This is our Mason cabin. This is our second cabin that we built. We also put that on Airbnb, and we also posted some photos to Instagram. This photo in particular of me on the bed was another photograph that really went viral and really shot up our followers. And really, it's, as I said, Instagram has been huge for really attracting our customer base. And really after that, we were like, okay, we're on to something. Let's continue doing this. And because of all of the exposure that we received through Instagram, we started to build up really incredible partnerships with municipalities, conservation authorities, private landowners. And then it really became a matter of trying to find the right suitable land to develop these cabins. And we're talking about land that is remote, that is nearby great parks, nearby great trails, but that isn't too far away from your creature comforts and from local towns. Like Mason Cabin, for example, is in Mountain Grove. It's not too far away from Charbet Lake that has a great coffee shop. So really our interest was building these off-grid tiny cabins in remote locations, but not too far away from local towns, so that you could really get to experience the local communities in the areas of our cabins. Maybe John, you want to take it from there?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about sort of coming up with the designs and some of the just sort of the architectural approach. I'm not an architect. I did do a lot of the design, or we worked together in various ways on a lot of the design work. Like Laura said, with the first Auburn cabin, that was kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit. But since then, we've progressed a long way. So the cabins that we're building now we all have architectural drawings. They've been through engineering review. They're all stamped. We're just finishing up actually being CSA certified. So most of the cabins that we build moving forward would also be what CSA Z240 manufactured homes. So people could technically live in them, although that's not really the design intent. But we've come a long way from that initial sort of flying by the seat of our pants, trying it out, to really nailing down and making sure that everything is to code and optimized. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about sort of from the top level. One thing I want to talk about is really just the idea of approaching like design with a philosophy. And I'll talk about some of those sort of the core tenets of our philosophy in putting these cabins together. So for us, a lot of what Laura had talked about was the intent was, we want to get out into wilderness spaces. So being close to trails, being close to paddling, and really engaging with the outdoors. So one of the reasons that we felt like we could get away with being so small is partially because it's intended to be a short-term stay. People are usually staying 2 or 3 days. But also the whole idea is we want the cabin to be a base camp for people to then get out and explore. So one of the main sort of ideas from the beginning was breaking down sort of the walls or making it sort of an indoor-outdoor space, and it not really being, when you're inside, you're not necessarily inside all the time. So we talked about doing, for example, like a Muskoka room outside as a separate sort of part. But as we pulled the design together, we came up with the sort of garage door, indoor-outdoor bars, one of our sort of signatures. But that was just, and the idea of a garage door ended up coming from, what's the best way that we can really open up a wall? And there's different types of approaches to that. There's accordion windows, but they, take up too much space, or there's so many ways that they just don't work. So we ended up with this sort of garage door, indoor-outdoor bar. And as you can see, it really opens up the space. It really creates or removes the sort of wall between the inside and the outside. And through some of the other pictures that you've seen and that you will see, we used a lot of windows. There's a little bit of a sort of, sacrifice for insulation there, but just because of the size of the space, we feel that like that's appropriate. We can still get away with that. Another big sort of focus was try to include everything you do need and try not to include anything you don't. And that comes back down to a tiny space. So, some of the just sort of little items, a little hard to see, but in the bottom right there, like in front of the sink, you'll notice we have a little flip up table. So after a little bit of time using the space, we realized like counter space was limited. Is there a way that we can, add a little bit more counter space without getting in people's way, essentially? As far as, like the kitchen essentials, like knowing that people are going to be renting, what do we include for people that they're going to need, and what can we sacrifice? And, one of those sort of big ones for some people is being solar powered. We have a limited amount of power. So we don't have coffee makers. We don't have any of the sort of electric kitchen appliances that people would have, but we do, there's alternatives for all of those. So we have French presses, we have like camp toaster. So finding ways to make sure that we could balance all that and have everything that we needed for people with sort of the limited amount of power that we have. So everything is really a decision, and we really had to partly experience it and test it out, but spend a lot of time thinking through like every part of a person's day in this cabin and how are they going to use it in order to decide how, every little decision of every little part is included. And that was really an evolution over time. And another big part for us, and this is, like I said, this was a core from the beginning, and like Laura mentioned herself as well, is, how can we really make these low impact, minimum sort of carbon footprint, minimum impact on the environment. So, one of our big arguments against or differentiators from being sort of a cottage rental is we're not clearing massive portions of the forest. We're not digging up for foundations. It's basically a surface foundation. The only thing we really have to do is a gray water septic. And I mean, as far as septic goes, it's quite minimal. So like we still have to do a little bit of digging. We still have to do a little bit of clearing, but again, like as you can see from this sort of bird's eye view of one of our cabins, I think we took down like 2 or 3 trees to get this cabin in here. So we were really able to, just from the physical footprint, minimize the impact, but also the fact that we're completely off grid. So we don't have to bring in water services. We don't have to bring in hydro services. We're able to really keep it as a contained unit. So speaking to solar specifically, we typically mount on the roof. Sometimes we mount elsewhere. But again, that's, because you're not running in hydro, it gives us access to areas that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get into. And we don't have to run, $10,000 a pole, hydro poles, to get power out there. If you want to talk about choices and making specific choices, materials ends up being a really big part of it. It's amazing how many options you have with everything that you do. And for us, it's, again, every choice is part of the sustainability. So we, kind of decided to go with higher end, higher quality materials, and try to minimize plastics, try to minimize the sort of stuff that would end up in landfill. So as you can see on the interior, pretty much everything in here is wood. We've got pine board inside. Our outside siding is all, we use Mybec siding. It's one of a few, sort of really good wood sidings, and steel roofs. So, I mean, pretty much everything that's the exterior enclosure is, 20 or 50-year warranties on them. So we know that they're going to last for a really long period of time. And I mean, I think just that in and of itself is a big part of the sustainability of the build, is just ensuring that the build is going to last for a long time and that you're not going to have to be replacing things all the time. Another really nice thing about this entire wood build on the interior is everything can be refinished. So essentially, if things get damaged or worn down, you can literally just sand it down and put another coat of varnish on it, essentially. So just because somebody puts a hole in the wall, well, they're not going to put a hole in these walls, but somebody damages the wall somehow, it's easily fixed. So you don't have to, things don't have to be disposable and things don't have to be replaced all the time. So we're very confident that 20 years from now, with proper upkeep, these can look pretty much the same as they did when we first built them. So that's a big part of it for us, is that we can keep these in good shape, and we're not constantly throwing out materials. I mean, that said, there's certain things that are challenges. Like the reality is, solar is not, or where it's at right now, solar doesn't heat. We can't really heat a space, even a space this small, without a massive amount of solar. So we are still dependent on, propane for pretty much anything to do with heat. So producing hot water, heating the actual cabin itself and the cooktop. So we still have a bit of a carbon output. But again, the size of the space, we're using a very, very small amount relative to what something like a full-size cottage or house would. So while we aren't quite there yet as far as a zero impact carbon footprint, we're about as close as we feel that we can be. And I'll let Laura talk a little bit about just some of the interior design and our interior design perspectives.
Yeah, I'll talk quickly because I know we have to get into the Q&A. The interior design portion is something that I really love to do and is sort of my domain in the company. The cabins are beautiful with or without furniture. So there's really not much that I have to do with interior design, but I very much do enjoy really special pieces in the cabin. I really enjoy vintage hunting and going to Value Village and finding really unique mugs and teapots. Actually, that's your grandmother's teapot. But yeah, I love putting little pieces in the cabins, blankets. I also manage the social media. And as I spoke to you before, Instagram has been huge for our base. And I really enjoy collaborating with amazing local businesses. So in that previous photo, that blanket was supplied to us by Anapaya. It's a local company in Ottawa. And so we do a lot, we've done giveaways together. And so this is just another photograph of some of the small little details. That paddle on the wall is actually one of our old paddles that we painted ourselves. We love the little deer head. We put that on a lot of the cabins. And books is something I love to have. I love curating our little tiny libraries in the cabins. It's a partnership I actually recently started with Penguin Random House Canada. They now supply a lot of the books in our cabins because we truly ran out of our own books. So I used to love taking our own books from our own personal library, and we've run out of our own books. So that partnership with Penguin Random House has been wonderful. So yeah, unfortunately in these times of COVID, we've actually removed all of the bedding and pillows from our cabins, but that was also something I really enjoyed doing, is finding, great throw pillows and blankets for the cabins. But yeah, interior design, it's all about just small personal details that I think really make our cabins stand out. And with that said, I think we're sort of running out of time, so we'd love to get to some of your questions if you have some for us.
Great presentation, John and Laura. And yes, we do have a few questions, so we'll just get right into them because people can feel free to type as we go. First is, so what's the process to visit, if we want to visit or book? Mm-hmm. And where are they located? That was also in there. So.
Well, so I mentioned Airbnb in the beginning. That was in the beginning. We had 2 cabins on Airbnb, but we quickly realized that we did not need Airbnb, and we started our own website. So all bookings go through our website, which is www.cabinscape.com. So you can view all 12 of our cabins there. We are quite booked up, but we do have some availability at some of our micro cabins. These are a new design, our tiniest cabins at Halliburton Forest. So you can visit our website. We're also on Instagram and Facebook.
And then we roll forward bookings. So for example, on the 1st of January, we'll open up the month of May. So
yeah,
1st of February, sorry. So on February 1st at 8 a.m., the month of May will be open. So each month we open up on the 1st like that.
Perfect. Growing interest in small homes and cabins and sustainable building practices. So there's a question here. Did you have to deal with any building code issues? You mentioned about obviously the gray water that you had to deal with, but any issues around building code, like the loft and steep stair access, for example, inside or anything outside?
Yes, constantly.
That's the biggest challenge of our business. Yeah,
I mean, that's been the biggest learning curve for sure. And it's, the building code is Ontario wide. The main thing with that is it's still subject to interpretation as far as the building inspectors that you're dealing with, or whether or not interpretation, a building inspector has the ability to, I don't want to say turn a blind eye, but kind of decide whether or not enforcement is that important in this scenario. So a big part of it has been finding municipalities with building inspectors that are easy to work with. With the CSA certification, it doesn't work like that at all. CSA is 100% exactly how the rules are written. So certain designs where we're able to kind of make things work with building inspectors, we can't with CSA. So it's really been it's been 3 years of finding a way to thread the needle. And it's the same with local bylaws, which are even more complicated because every municipality has a different bylaw. So finding municipalities that are easy to work with, that have bylaws that are workable, has been a big part of it as well. So there's a lot of places where we just know that we can't operate because the bylaw doesn't permit it. But finding the places that we can operate has been a very big part of the process over the past 3 years.
Now I see that they're mobile. I mean, you had to get them into their specific location, so they are mobile. But how long are they fixated? Like they're there for the long term? And
yeah, I mean, we originally started building on trailers under the sort of false pretense that exists around the tiny home conversation that trailers makes it easier. In Ontario, it does not. I think there's parts of the States where it probably does. So we actually travel on trailers and then take them off of the trailer for the most part. As far as duration, it's really a property to property scenario. We have a different lease with every different landowner. I mean, in a lot of cases, the intent of both parties is that we'll be there indefinitely, unless, you know, situations change. So we've only, of the 12 cabins we have, we've only had to move one once, and that was simply because the landowner was changing their usage of the property. So
Any issues with any animals showing up? These are pretty remote, so.
a mother bear and her cubs went right across right in front of this cabin that we're looking at right now.
Wow, nice.
The guest messaged me about that, and I didn't realize they were scared. I told them congratulations on the sighting, but so I mean, there's lots of wildlife around. We haven't had any real issues.
No issues.
Your typical, like, you know, insects and like all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. No, we haven't had any major problems.
So is there any specific plans for booking? Like, you know, what about birthday celebrations or Valentine's? Like any marketing specialties that you've kind of done?
We recently actually hired a full-time customer experience curator. Yeah, and her focus is building these types of packages because it's something that we've been hearing from our guests that they want. So a new package that she recently created is our celebration package. And she has partnered with some great local organizations like a Perth chocolate, the Perth chocolate store, Grange Winery, and Apropos Florists in Perth, and a professional photographer. So with that package, you come to the cabin and you have a professional photographer take professional photos of whatever occasion you're celebrating. And then on top of that, you get all of these lovely treats with your vacation. And then of course, we're working on all different sorts of new experiences and upgrades to get people also outside of the cabin,
Right.
You know, climbing experience or an ice fishing experience. So that's sort of the next level of our business. These last 3 years have been really focused on the cabins, but you know, moving forward, we're really trying to add on services and experiences to upgrade our guests' overall experience.
So we've still got a couple minutes left. So if anybody wants to put a question in the Q&A, by all means, go ahead and do it, or just write into the chat box. I'm just going to keep rolling through. So regarding the off-grid systems, do you have any like backup generators, or what's the specifics on the batteries? You mentioned you can't have some, you know, you don't have a kettle, but
yeah,
what's the,
We have a kettle. We have a
we stovetop kettle, yeah.
yeah.
The solar is pretty good in the summer, depending on the location. In the winter, it's a little more challenging. So typically at all the cabins, we do have a backup generator that the guests can run, and the generator just charges the batteries directly. So everything is still run off of the solar system. The only thing that runs off of the generator is we do have an emergency electric heater in the event that there's some sort of a heating failure, and then you can run the generator and run that backup heater. So that's just kind of like a backup system. But the solar is like at this mica cabin here, the picture that you're looking at, because of the amount of sun exposure that it gets in the summer, you never have to run the generator. In the winter, when the sun's lower and sometimes snow is challenging, you know, you need to run the generator sometimes in order to basically charge the batteries back up.
Okay, sounds good. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to one. Where can one find such packages, and what are the rates? They mentioned the website is www.cabinscape.com. You can click that, and it's right in the chat box. You can find all that information there. Are you building any more cabins right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got about 5 sitting in the lot at the factory right now. So like Laura said, we've got easily going to have 10 out by midsummer, depending on how everything goes with, I mean, COVID right now and everything else. Supply chain, you know, issues have been hampering us and all that kind of stuff. But we should have another easily 10 to 15 cabins out by next fall. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go with one last question. That there's actually, we probably could take this a whole other half hour because I'm starting to see more and more questions coming in. But so congratulations to you both for this. But just in terms of the design philosophy, what was the biggest challenge you had while working on this? So obviously you've learned a lot, you've done quite a few, but what's the biggest challenge? Design challenge, I guess.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, meeting code or finding a way to meet code is probably one of the biggest challenges. I mean, that's kind of a technical challenge. I know that's a design challenge. from the other side, it's just dealing with the limited space. Finding creative ways to make sure that, you know, there's a place for everything and everything's in its place, and that people are going to have, you know, the little spaces and nooks and crannies and storage and all that kind of stuff that they're going to need when they visit.
Do you guys live in a tiny house?
No.
No, but we're happy to visit them. I mean,
we couldn't live in a tiny house.
I mean, I've said from the beginning, like I think it takes a special person to live in one, I think. But I think it's really great not that you shouldn't live in one if you're that special person, but I think it's really great definitely as a getaway. And I think this is a really, you know, perfect use for it, where people are there for 2 or 3 days. And we can still keep the overall footprint small of our offering.
Well, listen, this is a fantastic business. You seem like a fantastic couple. I'm really glad this is working out for you, and I'm glad you've got more on the go. So thank you very much. And for all the attendees, thank you all very much for joining us today. And again, make sure you go to their website at www.cabinscape.com. That's where you can get more information, probably answers to some of the questions. And well, who knows? People might be bumping into each other from Algonquin at these various places. So very much appreciate your time today, John and Laura.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.